Hey everyone, it is 7:19 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is the month of November. It is the 5th day of the month of November, and I'm told it's the year 2022 from the birth of Christ. Anyone looking at the screen right now will see a picture. The young man who's on the screen is Paul McCartney. I'm going to switch to another tab. That man is not Paul McCartney. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with what's become known as PID, Paul is dead. It was one of the earliest, I guess we can just say conspiracy. It was one of the earliest conspiracies I remember hearing about, probably not that long after I had kind of started exploring conspiracies after FE, which is one of the early ones for a lot of people, starting around 2015, which is when I started hearing about it. When I heard about this, or not when I heard about it years before, but I didn't think anything of it at all. I didn't even understand what it meant when somebody told me there was this thing. Yeah, the Beatles did this or this because there was this whole thing about Paul being dead. And it didn't even register with me at that time. I thought, well, was that some artsy-fartsy, avant-garde thing they were doing? It didn't register. So, for some reason, I ended up stumbling across videos, websites, people talking about this idea that who we knew as Paul McCartney up to 66, maybe I shouldn't say we since I was born in 74, the guy known as Paul McCartney up till 66 ceased being the guy known as Paul McCartney from 66 forward. What I remember distinctly about that time period of hearing about this and then entertaining it long enough to start going out and looking at images is that, strangely enough, and maybe it's because from the time we are very little, we're basically trained to accept what we're shown and what we're told is what we are seeing. If they show us a picture, they say this is a picture of the Earth from space. We believe it. Well, it came from NASA. It came from an official source. How could they lie? We believe it, even in the face of, for instance, not that long ago, years ago, their chief artist saying, the pictures of Earth, they're composites. They have to take strips of data, essentially these long pictures that are made in strips, and piece them all together to make these pictures of the world. They don't have any. And, then we found out the ones that they were claiming are actually real pictures, like from the moon or from outer space, have been very aptly debunked by guys like Bart Sibrel and Rob Skiba. Did the photo of, what did they call that, moonrise, with the astronaut supposedly on the moon with the Earth in the background. He just adjusted the contrast in Photoshop and showed that was pieced in, which a short time later NASA actually changed the photo that they had so that you couldn't see the contrast difference. So anyways, just giving examples of how we've all been trained to just accept what's put in front of us. Oftentimes really just in the way of photos, videos, and things like that. And we're told this is this. and we just accept it. So it takes a long time when you decide that you're not going to accept what they tell you. You're going to look for yourself, and you're going to see what's there. And it took me a long time, in fact, of looking at what photos I could get, and they're difficult because you see certain interested parties now. Let's just take Paul McCartney, for example. Certain interested parties actually own the rights to just about all photos that exist of this person known as Paul McCartney, before 66 and after 66. And when an entity owns the rights to a thing, they can do whatever they want with it. They can alter it. They can take out the ear and put in a different ear so it's not so noticeable. Because that's one thing with people who still have undoctored photos that they can point out very quickly is the wrong ear. Photos that still exist, and sometimes videos are far better because you can see certain things better in videos, like, for instance, what videos have not been doctored by the likes of the people who own all of the images of the person known as Paul McCartney prior and post 66, have even doctored films, like the most recent film directed by Ron Howard. A lot of that stuff appears to be altered to make the first Paul McCartney look very much like the replacement Paul McCartney. However, no matter what, and of course there's always an accompanying story, right? Well, Paul was in an accident, and he had a few things done. He had some scars, so he had to start wearing a mustache in 66. And the Beatles changed radically, so they started growing their hair in different ways, and the big sideburn, which, by the way, the big sideburn, and anytime you see a lot of facial hair and all that, that makes it very, very easy to cut and paste parts of images together. If you have a large, long sideburn, it's very easy to put in a different ear over here than the original ear to make it look more like the first Paul, which this ear right here does look more like the first Paul. That's not the actual ears of the guy who's been playing Paul McCartney ever since. Let me see if I can get you a better shot of probably the more actual ear. You see that ear right there? And I know that's the right-hand side, and here we're looking at the left-hand side, but that's clearly a different ear style. Genetically, as a marker, it's far different. You see videos, when you can get videos, for instance, of Hey Jude, you'll see this guy here, his eyes are hazel, and when you can find some of the color videos that still exist of the pre-66 Paul, you'll see that his eyes are clearly brown. When you can get photos of the four guys together before 66, you'll see that the first Paul was actually shorter than the second Paul. These are things that can't be doctored. I mean, publicity photos can be. People can be made to look all kinds of different sizes. Publicity photos are easily doctored in a whole lot of different ways, but some things you usually have to go looking. You have to go looking at things like live videos, very impromptu shots, maybe pictures people have taken from their own personal phones and published, so on and so forth, and that's usually where you start finding the more nitty-gritty to all this. So I simply introduced this, and anybody who's not familiar with PID, there's a lot of sources out there. And I'm certainly not going to say that all of them are good, because they're not. I think there's a lot of junk out there. I think there's a lot of people muddying the waters for nefarious reasons, maybe just because they have theories that I don't agree with. It happens, and even sometimes people with the best intentions can introduce theories that aren't so great and maybe misleading. So, as with anything else, if you're not familiar with PID, you want to look into it more. There's a lot of folks out there that have a lot of information on it, but proceed very carefully. And at this point in time, I'm not necessarily going to name names because the subject has advanced in the years since I spent a lot of time on it. I don't know what everyone is saying about that particular issue right now because in my opinion, I have far bigger fish to fry than to pay attention to how that's developed over the years. Just my opinion is always be skeptical. So that was a lead-in to something that honestly, I'm going to tell you in all sincerity, I almost wish I hadn't seen this. Really. Maybe not even almost. I kind of do wish I hadn't seen this. Now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it. Now that I've heard what I've heard, I can't unhear it. And now that I'm aware that there is the same very weird, shady interim that we sort of saw with the Paul case, except the Paul case was much faster. This one was longer. And of course, this case involves some very weird things going on between what I believe is the old person and the replacement new person. Now, I don't have any answers as far as why this was done. And you may think the same thing, and you may say, well, what would be the point? I mean, the people we're talking about here, the guy we're talking about is not the status of Paul McCartney. The band we're talking about, not the status of the Beatles, I guess not in my eyes. Certainly not as far as just musicality and lastingness of music or cultural changing in my eyes. But, hey, I stopped paying attention to these guys a long time ago, and I just think everything that they've done, in 20 some odd years has been just hot garbage. So maybe I'm not the person to give the opinion on what they mean culturally and why this would happen. All I know is that it's happened. Now, the image that I have on my screen now is a picture of a very young, in this picture he's probably 18, 19 years old, John Frusciante, the guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who joined the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1988. John Frusciante was born in 1970, so he would have been just older than me. He would have been my sister's age. I was born in 74. He joined the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1988 and very quickly recorded Mother's Milk with them. If I get some people listening to this who know the Red Hot Chili Peppers discography, they know what it sounded like to hear the Red Hot Chili Peppers before Mother's Milk with Hillel Slovak and was it Jack Irons on drums? It was distinctly different. There's kind of a night and day difference. When you listen to Mother's Milk, first off, there's quite a difference in Chad Smith. In my opinion, just a far better drummer, Chad Smith. And I want to say this goes beyond my opinion to say that John Frusciante was head and shoulders above at 18 years old. He was head and shoulders in every way, playing, just his ability to play the guitar and the way that he played it, almost a preternatural approach that he had to playing, the way that he would interpret chord progressions that were far more detailed. And you don't have to be a fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers or that sort of funk rock sort of whatever thing they did to appreciate the sheer monster talent that was John Frusciante, this young guy at 18, and his approach to the guitar. And even when you just listen to the album before that, which they entitled the Uplift Mofo Party Plan, stupid title, you listen to that album, that's Hillel Slovak. Though strangely enough, on the Red Hot Chili Peppers' own YouTube channel, they have playlists that include all of their albums. If you select that album, so any album you select, as it goes through the songs, in the description below the screen that you get, unless it's a video, like an official video, if it's just an image of their album and the song playing, you'll see in the description they give credits to who wrote and performed on the song, produced, and all that stuff, okay? And on every song. And the bizarre thing is, in Uplift Mofo Party Plan, it starts with the probably the biggest song off that album was Fight Like a Brave. Strangely enough, it's credited to, as far as composition, John Frusciante and Chad Smith in there instead of Slovak and Irons. Was that an error? I mean, if it is, maybe they should change it, because that error isn't present on all of the tracks. So I'm just going to bring this up from their official YouTube channel, Red Hot Chili Peppers, just so that you can see that I'm not mistaken. This is the album, Uplift Mofo Party Plan. And as you toggle through tracks, below you'll have a description that will tell you provided by Universal Music, the title, the band, the album below that. It'll give you the publishing, 1987, Capitol Records LLC, released on, and then it goes here below. You've got the producer being this Michael Beinhorn, and in composition you have 4 names here. You have Michael Berzari, that's Flea. You have Anthony Kiedis, Chad Smith, and John Frusciante. But we were told that it was Irons and Slovak that performed on this album. And the thing is, go to the next track. The next track, you'll have producer Michael Beinhorn, give you some studio personnel, and then composer Anthony Kiedis, Jack Irons, Hillel Slovak, and Flea. So it's not as though they accidentally did that on the entire album, and over again, every other song, Kiedis, Slovak, Irons, Berzari. We'll even go to, just real quick, and then I'll move forward, the other pretty popular song from this album, Behind the Sun. And we're back to Kiedis, Beinhorn, Berzari being Flea, Irons, and Slovak. But the real outstanding hit, which is interesting because they began the documentary that they filmed at that mansion that they recorded, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic, and they began that with this song, Fight Like a Brave, credited to Frusciante and Smith. Just an oddity to throw in there. And I'm not going to be playing any of their songs because it's not that I'm concerned about being demonetized, because this topic is important enough to where it's whatever. And the amount of shekels that I make through monetization is nothing. I turn monetization on, to be completely honest with you, because I'm just kind of sick of everybody wanting something for free and never giving anything back, you know? So look, if I can make a few shekels off each video, I'm going to. Absolutely. What I'm concerned about is not being demonetized. I'm concerned that they could actually block it, especially given the subject matter, what I'm going to be going over here. So they released Mother's Milk. It was 88, 89, that area. And the guitar and the rhythm section is definitely enhanced by Chad Smith because he's a really excellent drummer. Whether you like that, what they do or not, and I don't particularly like the Red Hot Chili Peppers at all, especially since the late 90s. But I can tell you, anything before 88 I thought was garbage. Anything from 97, 98, which I know Californication was released in 99, but basically late 90s onward, garbage. Late 80s and before, garbage. So this little pocket in there from about 88 to 92, they were phenomenally good, at least musically. You still had Anthony Kiedis and his penis singing all the songs, but musically, they were phenomenal. They were all of a sudden so outstanding that Mother's Milk, really, musically, was a really great album. I kind of wish they wouldn't have thrown in a few of the tracks that they did, especially on the re-release, but it's in general, musically, great album. You can hear the difference night and day if you want to go through the pain of listening to the Uplift Mofo Party Plan and then listen to Mother's Milk night and day. Then you go from Mother's Milk to the album after that, which by that time Frusciante would have been 21 years old. Still a very, very, very young guy. Blood Sugar Sex Magik, which, there's no accounting for taste, and I understand that. And I'm not trying to do this based on taste, because their music, even Blood Sugar Sex Magik, which I think was, as I said, probably one of the best musical albums of the 90s, just for the sake of musicality. And Frusciante, easily one of the best guitarists, just for his work on that album of the 90s. And I don't even like what they do per se. But what he brought to them, starting with Mother's Milk and then going on to Blood Sugar Sex Magik, was just nobody else before or since has been able to touch that. And the incense part that I want to talk about. Because people might think when I say incense, maybe I'm just talking about Dave Navarro, who did that album One Hot Minute with them in, what was it, about 95? 4 or 5 area, which sucked. It was garbage. And I'm not talking about Josh Klinghoffer, who had sat in with them in the interim from 2010 to 2019, something like that. Not talking about him either. I'm talking about the 3 guitarists that they've had since John Frusciante. And some people might be wondering what in the hell I'm talking about. Or if you're not familiar with Red Hot Chili Peppers, what is this all about? What are you talking about? Well, here's the thing. So, whatever the circumstances were, and I've heard a lot of different stories over why John left in 1992 in Japan. They said they were in Japan touring on Blood Sugar Sex Magik, and he decided to leave. They said that they had to talk him into doing one more show that night, and then he left. I don't know. I've heard too many different stories, and that bothers me. And I don't particularly know what happened from 92 till about 97. There's about 4 or 5 years there that are real hard, weird, mystery years. Okay? Don't know. What I do know is that this guy right here, who joined up with the Chili Peppers to make Californication and 2 albums after that, this guy right here that's now on my screen, that everybody today knows as John Frusciante, there's not a chance in hell this guy is John Frusciante. There's not a chance. Now, the reason I even noticed this was this. So, Blood Sugar Sex Magik, it comes out, and I'm about 17 years old, I guess. John being 4 years older than me. I guess I was about 16 or 17. We're talking about 91, 16, 17, yeah. And the thing was, in 91, for those who are old enough to remember, in 91, of course, there's no internet. There's no internet, there's no cell phones. You can't bring up information super easily like you could today. You were so limited, especially, if you grew up like in a small town like I did, or even if you're growing up in the city. What do you have more than the people in the small towns. Maybe more access to magazine stands where you can go and you can, check out maybe whatever guitar player or Rolling Stone or anything else that might have John Frusciante in that and see him more often. For me, it was a matter of if you could find somebody who maybe was able to rent a tape or something like that of them doing a live show, which even, back then VHS tapes oftentimes, they could be grainy. Or maybe you would catch them on SNL when Roseanne and Tom Arnold hosted. That was probably 92, early 92. And this was a performance that, of course, everybody's going on to talk about because Frusciante was clearly, visibly bothered. And based on getting to know his personality a little bit before that, it was really clear he was very, very, very visibly bothered. And not only did he put almost no energy into the first song they did, which was Stone Cold Bush, which was off of Mother's Milk, which again, musically was a great album. It's a crying shame, to be honest with you, that Anthony Kiedis had anything to do with any of this. Why? Because, like I said earlier, all of their songs were written really written by a partnership of Anthony Kiedis and his dick. And the thing is, it gets old. It freaking gets old, man. I mean, that was almost the entirety of the Red Hot Chili Peppers until Mother's Milk, which it was still kind of strong, but you could all already hear quite a departure. But I mean, that was Blood Sugar Sex Magik entirely. Now, I'll give you, by the time they got to Californication, it was so poppy that Kiedis's dick had at least taken like a silent role in the writing partnership. But I would just simply say for Blood Sugar Sex Magik, it's almost so over and over and over. Here's a song about my dick. Here's a song about whores. Here's a song about, my dick and whores. And I think if musically the album wasn't so remarkably outstanding, and there wasn't at least those few tracks that were a departure from Anthony and Anthony's dick, it might be just a little too much. But the rough part is I didn't see John Frusciante very much back in the early 90s. So when Mother's Milk and Blood Sugar Sex Magik, I didn't see him. Very, very rarely. And, then after he left and the Chili Peppers had a stand-in guitarist, maybe I should have mentioned him too, named Enrique Marshall. And he was just, fly by night. He was in the video for Breaking the Girl. Frusciante was in the video for Under the Bridge, Give It Away. And I can't think of any other videos from Blood Sugar Sex Magik, but this Enrique Marshall was in the video for Breaking the Girl. He appeared in their MTV Music Awards appearance in 90-something, 94, maybe, 93, I'm sorry. And then he's gone, and then Dave Navarro comes in. Really bad match. So I just stopped paying attention to them. There was a lot of people who got excited, like maybe Dave Navarro, because Jane's Addiction. Jane's Addiction, who honestly, artistically, was at least a band where you didn't have to hear about Perry and his dick most of the time. And the writing was great, in part because the writing was mostly Eric Avery, the bass player. Outstanding bass player, but moreover, a great writer. So a lot of people thought maybe it'd be a good fit. It turned out not. It was garbage. And I don't know, me and probably a lot of other people just stopped paying attention to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Now, in 1999, like maybe late 1999, early 2000, a guy that I was just jamming with here and there, he came over and he had Californication. He says, it's a new Peppers album, man. The new Peppers, they're back. They're back. John Frusciante's back with the band. And he's like, his album's just awesome. All right, well, we'll check it out. And I remember he played at least 3 or 4 songs off that album. And now I hadn't heard Blood Sugar Sex Magik in years when he, and so I'm not really referencing it directly too well. But I am listening to these songs he's playing me, and I am thinking, they're okay. I wasn't hearing anything that was blowing me away. It's okay. Now, the thing is, from that point forward, they enjoyed this huge commercial success, really. I mean, Blood Sugar Sex Magik was definitely it was a huge leap for them, for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, based on where they were before that. And they did enjoy, like with Under the Bridge and Give It Away, a lot of commercial success, even Breaking the Girl, and Blood Sugar Sex Magik, and Suck My Kiss. Like, these were songs that ended up on the radio a lot. These were commercially big songs. In fact, I don't even know if they had as many hits on Californication as they did on Blood Sugar Sex Magik. Big hits for them, but in a really different sort of trajectory, where their music, in my opinion, by that time was more poppy, just shitty. For me, it fit in perfect with all of the garbage acts that were coming out sort of post-Seattle in the late 90s. It was like, oh yeah, that's a perfect fit. That's a shame. What does it matter if John Frusciante's back? The music kind of sucks. That was my opinion. And then I started seeing him in videos they were making, because Californication got, lots of press and lots of videos, and certain songs got really big off of that. Californication did, Other Side, Scar Tissue. And I started seeing this guy that, with this either long hair, or in one of the videos they had him sort of made up like he once looked back in the early 90s. It never registered. It just, the difference, because I wasn't familiar with the John from 88 through 92, 93. So a few weeks ago, for I don't even remember what reason, but it wasn't for this reason, I stumbled upon a video that was made by maybe like a MTV or VH1 or something, where it was a little bit of an interview walk through the mansion where they recorded Blood Sugar Sex Magik. I'm trying to remember whose mansion it was once. Like, a number of people had owned this place, and they converted it into a studio. It was kind of a big deal. They got Rick Rubin to come out and produce that album, which was a really big deal, because, I mean, Rick Rubin these days is sort of known as this great album producing guru guy from that era, late 80s and 90s, and then, maybe even after, because he produced at least a couple of their albums with the later guy who's going around calling himself John Frusciante, which I won't call him John Frusciante. If anything, I'm going to call him, he's Con Frusciante. It's not John, he's Con. So I saw this interview. It was just a little short piece, like maybe a 5-minute, and they're sort of going through the house and looking at this, that, and the other. And the thing is, it's the guy who's actually leading them through this, got the microphone that's telling them about this and that, and this is where we do this, this is what we do over here, and there's this and that and the other. I'm not really registering who this is at first. I know what the setting is. And I know that they're in the house. This is during the Chili Peppers and everything. But I'm not really registering who is this fucking guy. No shirt on. Boxers a couple inches above his jeans. Thin. But I recognize the tattoos. And it hits me. I mean, it didn't take that long, but this is firing off. The synapses are going off in my brain very quickly while this is happening. And it hits me. That's John Frusciante that I'm looking at. That's John Frusciante. And then I think, wait a minute. Who the hell is this guy that's been around since Californication? I mean, it was that fast. It was that fast. Now, I didn't know details. I knew that he was supposed to have become a huge junkie. I knew that they supposedly did interviews with him in like 96. Those interviews that some people have seen where he's supposed to be completely emaciated with long hair now, with yellow teeth, with his nose doesn't fucking look right whatsoever. His hands don't even look right. Now, before we keep going too far, remember a couple of things. What I'm saying here, I not only was a junkie for 10, 12 years of my life, and I know it intimately. I know everything that happens, the way you get, just without getting into places that I don't really feel like talking about. I know that life very, very well. One thing. Second thing, I'm a guitarist and a musician, and not half bad. And I can listen to 2 different albums. And I can determine after paying some pretty close attention whether that even sounds like the same guitarist or not. Based on not just necessarily the style of music that's being played, but the way that the guitarist expresses himself. Tone can be manipulated. You know, guys who are very savvy can get very similar tones so that one guitarist maybe sounds like another. But what they can't do is they can't exactly duplicate the feel and the approach of a certain guitarist, especially one who was, in my opinion, as brilliant as the real John Frusciante. Now, of course, I've only toggled through 2 photos. And I tried to write out notes for this, but then I'm like, you know, these notes, they're going to take forever. This is going to take away from a lot of other work that I do that's really important. But I wanted to publish at least this video right away. Simply just for the record, here is a video by somebody that most people will tell you there's nothing shilly about me. But maybe some people would tell you there is. I don't know. But I wanted it to be published by somebody pretty genuine before perhaps it catches on and people start understanding that this great fraud and con has taken place in our own time, right before our own eyes. And the spin doctors come out and start muddying up the waters and screwing this up. Now, I am going to ask you this video, and maybe I'll make some because there's just too much to cover here. Please share these. Now, a lot of people would say this is not nearly as important as the other work that I do. And maybe that's true. I don't think it is, but I don't know what all of the important elements to this are. So, let me just go through some of my notes so I can keep this video at maybe about an hour, okay? So, without us spending too much time racking our brains on why, because there's whys here, and the one thing to always keep in mind, you don't have to necessarily have the whys. You don't necessarily have to have the new perfect model or the new perfect theory as to why to simply have the evidence as to what is. So I'm going to give you as much as I can concerning the what is. The first thing I have written in my notes simply is physical features. A couple of things to keep in mind, okay? And this is, some of the things I'm going to say are not me being callous, cold, cruel, or anything else. This is me just approaching this in a very objective and detached way. But the first thing, the real obvious first thing, is that when supposedly John comes back in the late 90s, he is, he's got long hair, and he's constantly keeping this beard line. Long hair and beard line. Well, what long hair and beard line do, as I mentioned with the Paul switch, first off, long hair, which back during the Paul switch, the long hair wasn't necessarily all that in, and they had to kind of ease everybody into the cultural shift that they were also affecting at that time. But these days, he can just come right back, have extremely long hair, which does what? It covers, for one thing, his ear. It covers his ears. It covers and obscures parts of his face. Now, when he first came back, his hair did not seem this long. It was like quasi-long, but there was still sideburns, oftentimes a beard line. There's a few clips you can find of him clean shaven, not many, and if you find those, they are, in my opinion, I'm not going to play them again because we're talking about, I'm concerned they would get blocked, but they are out there where it is far more readily apparent that we're not looking at John Frusciante. Most of the photos that have been taken of him, from the maybe 97, 98 forward, are of a guy with long hair, oftentimes hair obscured entirely by the hair, or at least in part by the hair. So even when the hair is cut short, it's usually not cut too short. There's only very brief times when the hair was cut very short. And those photos and video clips of that extremely short hair are really, really weird looking. That's one thing. Another thing that's troubling is John here, as you'll see in this picture, and there are very few pictures that actually have the eyes highlighted. John here has hazel eyes. John Frusciante had hazel eyes. Okay? Con Frusciante has brown eyes. Now, I have seen, I think, one picture at one time, which is a really weird picture, and it looked like it was part of a big set of doctored pictures, where they made Con Frusciante's eyes look hazel. The overwhelming majority of all the photos you will find of Con Frusciante, his eyes are clearly brown eyes, whereas John Frusciante has hazel eyes. That's something that you can't fake his eye color, which was one of the things with, of course, Paul and Fall, because most people that get into PID, they simply just call the replacement after 66 Fall, as in fake Paul, F-A-U-L, Paul and Fall. Same thing. Paul had brown eyes and Fall had hazel eyes. So it was same thing, but in an opposite direction. And then, as I had already mentioned, there is the ear. So let's talk about ears. Ears are a big one. That's why I mentioned ears. That's why I mentioned things that they do to either obscure the ears so that they could be digitally changed very easily, which is done all the time. It's pretty clear. Or like in the case of Con Frusciante, keeping the hair long most of the time. But again, he can't do that all the time, and in the age of cell phones and all that, people are going to take a lot of pictures that he or the industry or whomever is making this all happen can't control. So on the screen, this is John Frusciante. And you'll see his ears, from this angle you actually can't tell, but he does have a different profile to his ears straight on. But what we're going to look at here is specifically the lobe. John Frusciante's lobe is actually an attached lobe that extends straight out from the jawline where it's attached. That's kind of the biggest. There's some other shape variations you can see to his ear too, but that's one of the biggest, clearest indications that we have. Because when we go to Frusciante, you'll see his ear right here in a picture that may be a fan snapped or something that we got online. And you can see that his lobe comes away from his cheek and curves downward. He's got a, in fact, in a number of other pictures, you're going to notice that lobe is somewhat a triangular downward lobe. John Frusciante had a very straight lobe right off the jawline. So absolutely clearly different ear. Now, I don't want to click on this because I want to keep this video that I have on here. But to the upper right, there's this video, and maybe I can find it in the pictures, because I have a picture section up. Maybe I can actually find, yeah, this one here. Okay, this is, for me, the real oddball. This is supposed to be him in 1996 in an interview. And I'll be completely honest, I don't even know if the guy I'm looking at here is either John or Con. Or if this is some kind of an actor playing a role here. He's supposed to be completely drugged out on heroin and who knows what else, but everything about his behavior doesn't strike me as any of the heroin addicts I ever knew, especially when they were high. So that's super weird. But let's look at a couple other things. So if we can then just talk for a quick minute about general anatomy and some claims that were made to try transitioning from John to Con. This is John, probably circa 1990, 91. Just pay attention to his anatomy. That the actual John was far more athletic looking. Even when he started getting skinnier, which was around Blood Sugar Sex Magik and the tour afterwards, still just a far more athletic looking, and not just that, but different, his body, quite different than Frusciante. So here's a picture of John. I don't know if I have to put this full up on the screen, but there you go. And now maybe here's one of Con, and maybe I can find a better one of Con. And you look at their bodies. First off, Frusciante, when he essentially this hip line here, everybody has it, but everybody's is shaped quite differently, and their rib cage. Frusciante actually has a smaller rib cage than John, and his hip line here is a little bit more pronounced in proportion to his rib cage, where John actually had a smaller hip line, is not as pronounced whatsoever, and he had a broader rib cage. Essentially, he had a bone structure where if he would have ate better, beefed up, he would have been a pretty big guy, because he just naturally, it's in his genes, the way he looked. Now, also, this John, his whole posture, his upper legs broader, the way he stood when he played, everything quite different than Frusciante. Now let me see if I can find another picture, because what they do is, even if you're trying to find pictures of original John, they will blend the two. Now this is original John right here, and you can see how remarkably different looking his body was. Let me see if I can get Frusciante right here. Okay, this is different. He's broader in the mid, and this is not broader from fat. He's just broader in the mid. That's the way his genetics have built him, and his rib cage is not as wide, barreled, and pronounced as John's was. Let me see if... and here it's hard to tell. You see, there's some people, no matter how thin, or if they have some tone to them, like when he first joined up, when Khan first joined the Peppers in like 98, 99, he was quite thin and muscular, and they did try to beef him up a bit so they could sell him off pretty well. And he looked quite a bit different than as he aged. And it became more and more apparent that we're not looking at the same guy. This isn't an age thing, okay? I can look at young... I made an example on in my Facebook group of Mickey Rourke. A young Mickey Rourke, like Rumblefish or something like that. He's a good-looking guy. And very different than the older Mickey Rourke that you saw maybe in Iron Man 2 and stuff, with all the collagen and shit like that. He had his nose broken and everything. He did look a lot different as he aged, but it was really clear, like as soon as he opened his mouth, or you saw his facial expressions, the way his lips moved when he talked, it was very clear that that's the same guy. He's aged. He's been battered a lot. And he's gotten a lot of shit done to his face. Mickey Rourke speaking. Same guy. I mean, clearly, especially when he talks, you can hear in the timbre. And this is something else I can't highlight here, is that Con Frusciante, first off, his vocal timbre is different than John. It's not just the denture thing, which I'll get to, too. It's the way he talks, the way he doesn't have the same sort of, I want to say, fluent vocabulary John Frusciante had. Con Frusciante uses a lot of like this and like that, and this and like and like and like, and I don't know if he's playing a character and that's why he says that so much. But, look, all right, so one more good look here at Con Frusciante and the very different body type that he has. Just body type, not even a criticism. And then John Frusciante. Very, very different type of body. Okay? John. Con. Okay? And we can even see the difference in the ears between John here, right? And Con here. Different ear. So the interim period and some of the excuses and some of the weirdness to all of this, which makes it even more something I'm going to pay attention to. So they said in the interim period, they said that he was using so bad, and they claimed that he was using like $500 a day in heroin or hard drugs. I don't know how anyone can do that. I wasn't even getting the quality of heroin when I was a user that somebody like John would have access to. And if I used or tried to use anywhere even near that, even if I built up my tolerance, and I didn't kill myself, which I probably would. You'd kill yourself probably very fast using that much of a high quality substance. And out in Hollywood, and him being a celebrity as he was at that time, he had access to good stuff. This is not like me, who's having to hunt around Gary, Indiana, and Chicago, and all that to try to find something decent. It's a completely different ballgame. $500 a day in hard drugs, whether it was heroin or whether he's splitting it between heroin and cocaine or whatever else. I super doubt that, like freaking super doubt that he could even survive. He'd be gone very fast, very, very fast. It's my belief. So what they say is that his habit was so heavy, and he was shooting up so badly all over the place and missing and everything. That's what happened to his arms. He had scars all over his arms so badly he had to have transplants and grafting. And then now the story switches, because then you hear, oh, there was a terrible fire and he burned his arms in that fire. He didn't burn his hands. He didn't burn his upper body, like just his arms from his shoulder to his wrists, where all of the very particular tattoos are that would have to be exactly the same. The very particular tattoos. And I'll tell you something, I have looked around and there are amateur makeup artists that can reproduce burn tissue on somebody's skin relatively easily. Can reproduce burn tissue, and if you have these jacked up looking tattoos, that you have basically just ready-made to go and can apply them, it can look very convincing. Well, they're all, yeah, it's the same tattoos, but, they're all messed up because of either the grafting or the fire or whichever story they're saying happened. And, you only really have to show that a few times, and then the rest of the time, just wear long sleeves. And then you don't have to deal with trying to reproduce those. I don't know if those are actual tattoos or if Frusciante actually has like genuine burn tissue on his arms or what. But this is not something that cannot be reproduced. Whatever it is that is actual truth about this. This is not something that can't be reproduced, is my whole point. The other thing is the teeth, okay? So John Frusciante clearly had a different dental line, absolutely clearly had a different dental line. And of course, and in my opinion, different lips as well. They get around this by saying that they pull out this guy that I showed you earlier, that's supposed to be him all drugged out. This one at the upper right, I don't want to bring up the photo again, but I showed that to you. Who looks like an actor in heavy makeup that's trying to act like some drugged out lunatic. And you can see his teeth, this guy's teeth, they're terrible. Yellow, they're protruding too. And the lips, the upper and lower lip, are sticking out on this guy so much that I would believe he had some kind of prosthetic teeth in when he's doing this. Not sure. I don't even think, honestly, that guy, the 96 drugged out interviews are either of these guys. To be honest, no idea what that is. So they say that he had a dental infection that was so bad that they had to pull all of his teeth and give him falsies. And so that's why they say that Frusciante talks the way he does, and of course, why his teeth look different, why his face looks different. Well, I've known tons of people that get falsies and their faces don't look that different. Not like his. Their lips don't look that different. Not like his. And certainly their noses don't change so much that they're unrecognizable, like from John to Con. Now, I didn't catch the story where his nose was broken and broken and broken and broken and broken, and reset so badly that not only does it not resemble John Frusciante's nose, but it is actually hooked downward. So here's John Frusciante. I know that's it's not a great image. It's not a great image. And I'm sorry, but this is about all I got. John, that's actual John. Of course, he's making a face there. Maybe this would be better. See, here's John. This is John right here. Okay? And let me see if I can get you a nice close-up of Con. It's really clear in the video for scar tissue just how different. And then look at this body again, how different the body is. Him at the waist or right above the waist, it's broader. He's not fat, it's broader. It's not the same body. And they don't change that much over the years. And all the years that I used heroin and cocaine and meth and other drugs, the actual structure of my bones and the shape of my body didn't change. I lost muscle mass and put on fat in certain ways, but when I got clean and started getting healthy again, it just snapped back to very much like it had been. So look at that nose. Put this up. That nose right there. And the head. Oops. Where'd he go? Okay. Oh, sorry. There. Look at this nose, this jaw, these eyes, that head. Look at this guy. This is John Frusciante. Look at this guy. This is not John Frusciante. His nose is wildly different. His jawline is different. The way his neck comes into his face and his jaw is different. He has a protruding lower chin. Not this guy. Telling you folks, this guy ain't nothing like this guy. And he ain't nothing like the guitar player that this kid, and I keep calling him a kid because he was a kid. I'm 40, I just turned 48 years old. And even though he did all of his work that I've ever heard him do, which I believe was only Mother's Milk, Blood Sugar Sex Magik, and maybe he played on Fight Like a Brave, and Hillel Slovak did not, according to the credits that Red Hot Chili Peppers are giving on their own YouTube channel. That was the body of his work when he was a kid, from the time he was 18 till he was 22, and it was phenomenal. It was, you don't even have to like that kind of music to understand how phenomenal it was. And not just was it phenomenal, I would recommend anybody listen to Mother's Milk, listen to Blood Sugar Sex Magik, and then go fast forward. Then go listen to Californication. The album after, what was the album after, By the Way? And then Stadium Arcadium. Those are supposed to be the three when John returned, or the three with Con Frusciante. Night and day difference. You need to listen to the expression. John Frusciante, as an expressionist on the guitar, played 100% with his heart. You need to listen to the music with headphones or earbuds so you can really hear. For any of you musicians out there or music enthusiasts that really listen, that like to listen with headphones or earbuds so you can really hear, listen to John Frusciante, the way he plays, 100% with his heart. He played masterfully, and not only masterfully, because you can find plenty of people who play great technically, but you're not going to find that many who play great technically and at the same time with all the feel that he played with. He was like a juggernaut on guitar, truly. And one of the reasons he probably doesn't stand out in a lot of people's minds, besides the fact that he was associated with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is unfortunate, not speaking badly in that way like a Flea, who is an exceptional bass player, truly an exceptional bass player, or Chad Smith, who's truly a really great drummer. But the context of what they're doing, and I have to think a lot of it is really just how far down their caliber of what they do musically is brought by Anthony Kiedis personally. And maybe that's just me. I can't stand the guy. I can't stand the way he sings, if that's what you want to call it, expresses himself, writes, or anything else. You don't even have to appreciate that style of music to listen to those albums, Mother's Milk and especially Blood Sugar Sex Magik, and listen to the real greatness you have in not only proficiency, but feel, the heart. It's amazing. And what I was saying was he doesn't get the same kind of comparisons made about him to a lot of the other guitar greats that emerged in the 1990s. For one thing, because John did very few leads. His guitar playing was so in service to the song that, for one thing, it didn't stick out like Con Frusciante's guitar playing is very much more right out there. That was not John's guitar playing. It was absolutely in service to the song, which is even more phenomenal to me, given his age, how mature the approach to his parts, how he and who he was within the context of a song was phenomenal. So you wouldn't get these huge leads that anybody would talk about from John. Now, if you saw John, not Con, John live, this kid was really great. He could do just about anything. He could impress live. Really great. He had a great grasp of using effects, improvising, being a really great showman too. Now, all of these things I'm saying, these positive things, I don't want anybody to get the idea that I'm implying that John didn't come from an in-crowd family, which very well may be the case. His father ended up, his father went to Juilliard, was a Juilliard graduate. This is based on the commonly accepted story of John and who he was, okay? So I haven't confirmed these things. This is the story, okay? His father, Juilliard graduate, and then went to law school, graduated law school, and became a judge. He was some sort of a circuit judge, district court judge in Florida when he and John's mom separated and they moved out to California. I'm told that's official story. Is there something more to that? Maybe there is. Maybe a lot of that story is the story from Con Frusciante and not John. I don't know. I haven't heard John actually talk much about that. I've heard him just little clips, you know. You'll find a lot, if just very much like the Paul and Fall thing. The more Fall talks about periods in time that he wasn't a part of, where he puts himself in the shoes of Paul when the Beatles were young, before they got popular, they got signed and everything. Aspects of the story changes. You'll find the same thing with John and Con. So the other strange thing is the involvement of John with River Phoenix or River Bottom, because his so-called his father, even though he looks nothing like his father, okay, Joaquin Phoenix is like a carbon copy of their father's name being John Lee Bottom. River looked nothing like John Lee. But anyway, so his name probably legally was probably River Bottom, but the death of River Phoenix, and how much Johnny Depp, that piece of shit, and Gibby Haynes, that bigger piece of shit, I think. Well, Gibby Haynes is a more public piece of shit than Depp. Depp probably hides it a lot better. They were both involved not only in the death as far as proximity of River Phoenix, because it happened outside of Johnny Depp's club, the Viper Room. Gibby Haynes was there. Gibby Haynes and Depp were pals. And Gibby Haynes and Depp directed, produced a film not long after this, like pretty short after this whole incident with River dying. John was there that night. And they were supposed to be playing together along with Flea and some other musicians at that club. And all kinds of shit went down. And of course, the story always changes and who knows what actually happened. John was there. It's said that River's apparent father, John Lee Bottom, blamed John Frusciante for the death of River. But, John Lee Bottom, the shit he was involved with, this Christian so-called Christian cult he was involved with, the fact that there were tons of rumors that they believed in having sex with children and having sex with each other, group sex, orgies, weird shit, man. They were definitely culture creators, changers. They sound pretty fucking debauched. And then right after all this shit happens, Johnny and Gibby supposedly make this 12-minute documentary called Stuff, where they supposedly go to John's house, and they're supposed to be, this is the story. The official story was, well, we wanted to document the condition that John was in as a plea to him for him to get better. That's the official story. But you watch it, and it's just dirty, and it's dark, and it's fucked up. And it's mostly these shots, these blurry shots of a completely messed up, nasty house, a garage, shots of Just a mess everywhere. That's all, mostly shots of a mess everywhere. Now, John is supposed to be in the film, but the problem is every shot that John's in, there's only a few, are either very blurry, so you can't really tell it's him, or there's one where he's supposed to be facing in the other direction, and that's not blurry, but all you see is the back of this guy's head. He's dressed pretty well in the sense that he has a button-up shirt and a sweater over it. And if he's a terrible junkie, I can't imagine him dressing like that. Now, what's really truly bizarre about all of this shit is that the end of it is really morbid in the sense that they show this person supposed to be John, though it's too blurry to positively tell, laying on this couch in a position that's like a death position, you know? And just before they show that, they have Timothy Leary, that CIA scumbag. Timothy Leary is in this movie, looking like he's doing some kind of screwed up pantomime or something, sitting on a table. I'm not kidding. And there's these flower arrangements that appear throughout this little thing, and they say in the credits at the end, flower arrangements courtesy of Perry Farrell. That's the singer of Jane's Addiction. What the hell does he have to do? Why is he arranging flowers for what's supposed to be, this is supposed to be two friends of John Frusciante, because Depp and Hames claim to be his friends. It's supposed to be two friends going there to film the condition of his home and his life and himself. Why are they arranging flowers around here to make it look very much like a set? Everything about it actually does look like some kind of a set that people just created to make it seem a certain way. It's very seedy. Everything about it's very seedy. And then you have that 96 interview, and I'm telling you, that guy that appears in that guy that looks like a walking corpse, he doesn't look like John. He doesn't really look like Con, though he probably looks more like Con than John. And one of the things is the hands. Now, it is true that if junkies start shooting into their hands and their fingers, they'll swell. But one of the problems is the actual... So John Frusciante had articulate looking fingers. His thumb and his fingers were very articulate looking. But the hands of this person in that 96, the real nasty one that looks like he's a zombie with yellow protruding teeth and lips and all of that stuff, the hands aren't right. The fingernails aren't right. Even if you could say, well, the hands and the fingers were swollen from shooting up in there, and then it looks like there's scars on the arm from shooting up and all of that. Yeah, you can swell. Your tissue will swell on the back of your hands. Sometimes if you're missing in your fingers, those might swell. But the shape of your fingernail isn't going to change. The actual John Frusciante had different shaped fingernails. The profile of the way that your thumb juts away from your hand and the shape of your thumb, that's not going to change. And the guy appearing in that film has a completely different look. And I think he actually appeared on different photos that they tried to take of like John during this time. His thumb is completely different and his hands are different. This is not just swelling from missing and getting, minor infections underneath, in your skin and all that stuff. I've had that. I did that. I know what that looks like. And it's all wrong. So I know after all of this, there remains that question, why? Why go through all of this? Why not simply just say, why not the Peppers just say, we found another guitar player? And, they record Californication with him. And look, hey, it's a big hit. I mean, clearly the songs on Californication were better than One Hot Minute with Dave Navarro. Those are they're terrible. They're crap. I mean, even the ones that were a bit more popular, like Friends or Airplane, still kind of crappy. I wouldn't say that they were necessarily crappier than Californication. They were just crappier in more of a maybe messy way. Yeah, it's hard to describe. You'd have to listen. And, you know, I hate to encourage all of you to spend so much time listening to this stuff, because a lot of it's just total degenerate music. And when I say degenerate, I don't just mean degenerate like about, you know, sex and lewdness and all that. That's not what I mean. There's a place for that in art. But, you know, there's, in my opinion, there's a way to go about that I think is a more noble way of going about those things. Everybody has those urges, the sexual urges and other kinds of urges. And the thing that separates us from the animals is whether or not we have the sensitivity and the willingness, and then the ability to express ourselves in ways that isn't purely animalistic. So in that sense right there, I find it just entirely degenerate. So I don't know why. Why not just say John died? Because it's my opinion that John died. It's my opinion that John died in 93? Maybe. 93, 94. And he's gone. Why not just say he's gone? I don't know. Was the fact that he was connected with one of the most brilliant albums, musical albums, for a long, long time? And that's exactly what Blood Sugar Sex Magik was. Was it the fact that he was what made that so brilliant? I mean, he was probably the biggest part. Not to take anything away from Flea or Chad Smith, who were really, in their own rights, pretty excellent. But was it the fact that his brand, as far as being connected with all of that, would carry so much weight in trying to reintroduce them in the late 90s? It still seems kind of weak to me, because there's a lot of lying that has to be done. But, you know, look, anybody who aspired to deceive everyone in this way, and it's deception and it's criminal. And that's why I'm making this video, even though this is not the normal thing I do, because it's deception and it's criminal. Anybody who aspired to do anything like that, they would have as their role model that it can be done successfully for decades. They'd have Fall. They'd have Paul/Fall. And maybe they would have a number of others that we just haven't caught onto yet. So maybe by now, you know, in the mid to late 90s, when whomever it was decided to pull this one off, they already had a proven track record. Certainly with Paul/Fall, and who knows which others. Because now, having discovered this, it makes me think and wonder, how many others have there been that we just haven't been paying enough attention to? One last thing before I stop this, I'm almost at 1 hour, 20 minutes, is I knew the name Frusciante was likely French, of course, so I typed Frusciante into Google Translate. The English translation of Frusciante is frustrating. And I don't know what that has to do with anything. It just is. Like a lot of these things that I've mentioned so far. They just are. So maybe another video on John versus Con will come in the future. I would certainly like to put the topic to bed as soon as I could, but sometimes there's just topics that your own mind won't let you get away from unless you explore them, and it appears that this one is one of them. So with that, I'll close, and we'll see you guys all on the next brief or whatever the next video ends up being. Take care.